guys, I wanted to talk to you today about your setup for your Pilates or mat work exercises. So this will be the base from which we work from for all of the other exercises that I'm going to teach you down the road. So I want to make sure that we take this time to really focus on that setup so that you know what I'm referring to when we learn other exercises and I refer back to that initial position. So we start out lying on our back, and I like to start with the feet touching. So my feet are close together, and then all we do is turn the feet out, toes out, and then heels out so that they line up with our hips, knees, and feet all in one straight line, as if I'm laying on railroad tracks. So my knees are pointing up towards the ceiling, and I've got nice railroad tracks that I'm evenly spaced on. The next thing we want to think about is our neutral spine position. So neutral spine refers to the position of our spine. So how we find that is by arching our back so that we make a tunnel underneath, and then flattening our back all the way down to the mat, and then coming back to a midpoint. So you may want to do that a few times. Arch your back all the way, flatten your back all the way, couple times just to get a sense of the movement that you have in your spine, and then find your neutral position. That should be in between those 2 points, and for each of us that is an individual position. Once you have your neutral, you're going to find your hip bones. So you'll put your fingers on your hip bones and then slide in and down so that you're kind of resting your hands flat along your lower tummy. And this is where we're going to set our center, which is activating just the deeper core, our diaphragm, transverse abdominis, pelvic floor, and multifidus work together to give us really nice support as we go further into other exercises. So that's our first step no matter what we're doing. So all I'm going to do here is take a breath in and then breathe out all the way, relaxing my rib cage, and then slowly and gently think of drawing my hip bones towards one another, just gently, as if there's two gentle magnets pulling them in. And what we want to make sure here is that we're getting a drawing in sensation and not a pushing out sensation. So we don't want those muscles popping out. I know that's what feels like you're doing work, but that's actually going too far, and that's overachieving. So we want to just establish the connection in that lower and deeper core before we layer on some of those bigger muscles. That's what's going to be important to carry us through and help with any pain that might be developing throughout our life. So now I've got my center set. The next thing I want to think about is my breathing. So we did that one breath, but now I want you to focus on your breath. So I like to put my hands on my rib cage, and then as I inhale, I push my ribs out into my hands. Good. And then I exhale and melt my rib cage down. Notice that I'm not arching. So what I want is an expansion of the rib cage. What I don't want is this, an actual creating of space or arching or lifting the rib cage towards the ceiling. We actually want the opposite. We want the rib cage to stay heavy and connected to the ground. So it's widening the rib cage and almost trying to contact the floor even more as we do that. So it's inhale, widen against the floor, and then exhale, melting the rib cage down towards my hip bones. Not forcefully, just a gentle melt. And then I want to think about my shoulders. Oftentimes, and I include myself in this, we end up throughout life in this kind of rounded posture of letting our shoulders come forwards. So when we lay down, sometimes that stays, and there's quite a bit of distance between the shoulder and the floor. So a nice visual image that I like to think of is thinking about your collarbone smiling wide towards the ceiling. So we create a sense of width, but remember, we're not poking the rib cage down. So as each of these elements, as we layer them on, we keep the previous one. So I keep my rib cage heavy, but now I widen through the front of my collarbones, and you may feel a little sense of almost stretch across the front of your chest, or a bit in your upper back, because oftentimes it's so used to being rounded that when we now start to widen, get it into a more neutral or straight position, it can let us know. And then finally, our head and neck. So what we'd like to do here is we don't want to poke our chin up to the ceiling, but we also don't want to crush it down towards our chest. So that is where you decide how much pillow or support you get. I usually am between nothing and just a 1-inch cushion. So you decide what you'd like for your head, but what you want to make sure is that you have a good amount of space here, but your chin is not poking up towards the ceiling. So we have that famous visual image or analogy as holding a peach between your chin and your chest. So I'm holding a little ripe peach here and not letting it move. And this is our setup for our next movements. Any other movement that we do in this position or on our tummies or on our sides or on our hands and knees all stems from this setup. So we have our neutral pelvis, our center, our feet and knees and hips are all in alignment. Our rib cage is melted down towards our hip bones. When we breathe, we're thinking of expanding the rib cage as opposed to poking it up towards the ceiling. And we're thinking about smiling our collarbones wide and creating length through the back of the neck. So the back of my neck is getting longer, like so. And I'm having a little peach between my chin and my chest so I don't end up losing it and poking my chin up towards the ceiling.